Alright gamers, and especially old school gamers I should say in particular, especially of Konami, one of the greatest companies of video gaming history, that made some of the greatest franchises from some of the best Ninja Turtle games, the Contra, Life Force, Castlevania, you name it. They did some great stuff, and that's why I want to bring you to the Anniversary Collections. Yes, there's quite a few that have been recently released over the past several months, and first one I'm going to take a look at, in chronological order to be exact, is the Castlevania Anniversary Collection. Yes, released on May 16th of last year in the United States to be exact. The Castlevania Anniversary Collection consists of several games in a collection which is downloadable content only, at least to my knowledge. Released not only for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Steam on PC, and also the Nintendo Switch. Yeah, and you already know which one I went for. Yep, I mean, what could be better than playing it at home, as I always say? Well, how about playing it on the go? Yeah, since Nintendo made this awesome hybrid console, all these anniversary and remastered collections and remastered classic games, why not, right? And, well, let's take a look at it, shall we? How good is it? Well, to be short and sweet to the point, it's a pretty decent collection. It has most of the classic ones from NES, like the first three to be exact, Castlevania 1, the one that started it all, Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, which I know was not a favorite amongst most fans. It tried to be more like a Legend of Zelda type game, but kind of failed depending on which way you look at it, I know. So it's either one that you either like or don't like. I understand that. I wasn't really a huge fan of this one. So then Castlevania 3, which, well, brings it back to its full glory, but tries to go for the more non-linear style, choose your path, in other words, but it's more straightforward and, easy to figure out where you have to go, and adds more characters that you can play as, even though it ups the difficulty a lot more. And yeah, all the NES games do have stiff controls, but they still have awesome gameplay and challenges and awesome music as well. But the games are hard as hell. Yeah, trust me, with stiff controls, you do feel like you're getting a challenge, but kind of a frustratingly unfair one. I'm sure anybody can agree with that. But luckily, bada bing bada boom, once the 16-bit era came around, Super Castlevania 4, which if you've seen my best Castlevania game list, you already know how much I love this one, just like the AVGN does. I couldn't agree more. Much more improved controls, better graphics. It took clear advantage of what a 16-bit upgraded version of Castlevania game can do, and basically story-wise made it a remake, which, yeah, it's awesome. Being able to whip in 8 different directions, it's all on here, it plays great just as you remember it, it sounds great just as you remember it, and being able to take it on the go, what more could you really ask for? And so, not only includes that, but also includes Castlevania from Game Boy, yep, the Castlevania Adventure to be exact. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm really not too crazy about this one. I mean, it just has not aged well, going back to playing this after so many years. Even though it's on a black and white handheld console, which is pretty much the first of its kind, you move like a damn slug, even though the whipping is pretty decent with its control-wise, but moving too slow, really, it's just tedious. And with the enemies moving much faster than you are, it's kind of unfair. The jumping kind of sucks, which could be a huge drawback considering you have to avoid hazards and everything like that. Climbing on ropes. And not to mention jumping through these platforms. Huh, screw it to hell. But as I said, this was the first of its kind. I think you can go easy on it. Going back? Yeah, I don't think I can go back to this one. Now the sequel, on the other hand, is definitely an improvement. Aside from giving you the option to select your stage, which is the only time you ever do this in this series. Gee, I wonder how Capcom feels about that. The moving controls and the whipping and everything like that is vastly improved, but it still has some drawbacks. So, in other words, if you didn't like the first one, play this one. It's definitely an improvement, at least for the black and white Game Boy standards. I mean, what do you expect out of most of these? They're all just watered down versions of their console counterparts. You can't expect a whole lot for the time being. In other words, when I say it improves over its predecessor, that ain't saying a whole lot. But it's saying something. They were on a black and white handheld console. What more do you expect? They were the first of their kind. To be able to take these on the go, I think I can get over that. Anyway, getting back into the home console games, 16-bit to be exact, we also have Castlevania Bloodlines, yep, from Sega Genesis, and it's kind of a shame that we never got this re-released on any virtual console of any sort. Not the Wii, not the Wii U, not even 3DS and 3D, because this is actually a pretty damn good game. Though not as good as Super Castlevania 4 on Super Nintendo, but it does have some interesting elements and aspects. For one thing, there's no whipping in several different directions. If you pick John Morris as your character, that is, he gets the whip. That's right, you could pick between two different characters. If you pick Eric Lacard, you get a spear weapon instead of a whip, which thankfully you can use like the whip in Castlevania 4, you can move it in several different directions. And instead of exploring graveyards and creepy looking places that you're more familiar with in any Castlevania series, you explore different parts of Europe, and of course end with a boss fight. It's pretty cool and everything, but it doesn't control quite as good as Super Castlevania 4 as well, and it definitely does have that Sega Genesis sound effect quality to it, if you know what I mean. And to me, almost sounds like farting noises. But what do you expect on this console? It plays good, it's fun to play, and it is very challenging and fun to play, but once again, not as good as Super Castlevania 4, but I am glad to finally be able to relive the memories of playing this game. It also is available on the Sega Genesis Mini that re-released recently. You also get, never released in the United States but only in Japan, Kid Dracula. Yeah, apparently they converted everything to English, making it look like it was an NES release title when it never was. It's more or less a parody of Castlevania in a rather comedic way because, well, it has the name Dracula in the title, and I ain't got much to say about it. It's okay, for the most part. You shoot projectiles, yeah, not using the whip, but shoot projectiles straight forward, and you can shoot them straight up to take out enemies. And your health is represented by these hearts, which you can upgrade by getting another one right here. And as you guess, each stage ends with a boss fight, which this one is a small ghost, and then you get a big ghost that he lures in, which, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, looks more like Eric Cartman's costume from the first South Park Halloween special. I only ran through the first two levels of this game just to get somewhat of a genuine impression, but you get some kind of a weird mini-game which sort of reminds me of Plinko a little bit, and it determines the next level you're facing. The first level, I should mention, did have some familiar elements to Castlevania, but this next level reminds me more of Mega Man, really. I mean, seriously, what else could it remind you of? Oh, and the boss fight? A freaking chicken. Seriously. You gotta shoot it straight up to hurt it. I got no comments there. Oh, and might I add, you also got upgrades for your weapons in between levels too as well. So, like I said before, it's just okay. In other words, I'm not fully disappointed this game never saw an international release. Some games are best left in Japan, and speaking of which, yep, you not only get the USA versions of these games, you also get the Japanese versions of these games as a bonus. And okay, while most of them play pretty much the same, with the exception of Japanese subtitles as opposed to USA, since, well, it's from Japan, the first Castlevania game on NES does feature an easier difficulty which removes the knockbacks, as you lose less health when you take damage, and enemies are much easier to kill. If you choose the normal difficulty, it plays exactly the same way as the US version does, knockbacks and everything. Well, there's no Japanese version of Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, so we'll skip to Castlevania 3, and this one has quite several differences than the United States version, and first one you notice is a couple of graphical differences. And I have to say, Japan's version actually looks graphically better, wouldn't you say? And the music even sounds better. Though it does play pretty similarly to the United States version, but like I said, there's a few graphical differences and a bunch of other things you might notice along the way. But the one I really took note of, like the United States version, when you get to the final fight against Dracula himself, he comes in 3 different forms. But unlike the United States version, if you die, you get sent back to almost the beginning of the stage, which is complete horseshit. But in the Japanese version, thankfully, they put much more care into it, and instead send you back to the stairs right before the Dracula fight, which is definitely much more fair. I mean, for Christ's sakes, this level's a frickin' nightmare as it is. But yep, that right there shows you that Konami definitely put more care into the Japanese version than the United States version. As for all the other games, they play pretty much the same way as they do in the US. Their version of Castlevania Bloodlines is for some reason called Vampire Killer. Well, okay, I guess it makes some sort of sense because that's what you are killing eventually. But otherwise, it pretty much plays the same exact way. You got the option screen, just like in the United States version, character selection, all the same sound effects, not much changed right there. Same goes with Kid Dracula, even though of course that game is originally a Japanese game. Never originally released in the United States, as I mentioned before, assuming that's what that title is saying in Japanese. Same goes with the 2 Game Boy games, and of course, my favorite, Super Castlevania 4. Nothing changed. Just the same good old Castlevania 4 as you remember it. Konami knew what they were doing in Japan, and they certainly were when they imported it to the United States. Still, simply a masterpiece. Also, I should mention most of these anniversary collections, and this one obviously is no exception to that. You have the option, if you think the game is too difficult, to save at any point in the game, and any of the games in the collection. Yes, each one gets their own save point, but of course if you save, it writes over the other save point, and you can load if you screw it up. Yeah, it may be cheating, but in a game series this hard, I kinda don't feel bad. I mean, come on, at least I'm giving myself a fair challenge. But otherwise, yeah, pretty damn good collection, not much to say there. With the Japanese imports, as I mentioned before, can't go wrong here for $20. Especially on a Nintendo hybrid console that you can take on the go. And it's deserving of a Wii Remote Wii Motion Plus up and a plain Wii Remote up. Trust me, it's a pretty bloody good time. So, anyway, next collection, the Contra Anniversary Collection. Yes, another great series made by Konami. How is it? Does it hold up as good as the Castlevania collection? You bet your ass it does. In fact, I think it has even more than that one does. I mean, you not only get the arcade games of both Contra 1 and Super Contra, which both have the 2-player option as well as the 1-player, and it is great to see where it all started in the arcade, but I think most of us can agree, the NES is where it's all at. Yeah, sure, the graphics aren't as great. I mean, it's typical NES graphics compared to the arcade counterpart. And sure, the NES version did change some of the level and boss fight designs as well, but I think most of us can agree it is superior. I mean, this is one of the few prime examples that the console version outdoes the arcade version. Not only with the first one, which yes, the classic Konami 30 Live code does work, and it plays and sounds just the way you remember it from the original NES, and yes, it even has the 2-player option, which they all do in fact,